Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Sunday, the 8th of May. It's Mother's Day and preparing for outsiders and first dog on the moon.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not. Indeed, yes, 20 to 10. Well, there may be an election called today, so we will treat that contingency with the seriousness that it deserves. Gathered to talk over the issues. Associate Professor Con Stavros, from the lecturer, Associate Professor in Marketing at RMIT School of Economics, Finance and Marketing. Georgina Downer joins you too, from the Administrative Committee of Victorian Liberal Party. And Dr. Chris Lawrence, Indigenous Lecturer, Research Fellow at the Indigenous Health and Equity Unit at the School of Population and Global Health at the University of Melbourne. Welcome all. Okay, who went off then?
Georgina.
Is there news? Georgina, is there a development? Nothing's happening. It's a strange moment, isn't it? We've been expecting this election to be called for a while now. I have a pet theory, Georgina, but Malcolm Turnbull won't do it today, but he's just playing us along.
No, I think it's likely it will be today. So your colleague Andrew will at least have some culmination to his very wet morning. Yes, yeah.
It's a strange little performance. It's a thing in Australian journalism to gather by the gates of whatever vice-regal home you might be proximate to.
But it's a great ceremony, and I think an important launch to one of our most important democratic tradition in this country.
And Con, we know that it's serious, and as a marketer and a man of those skills, you will appreciate the significance of this gesture that Shadow Treasurer Chris Bowen has shaved off his beard today.
Yeah, so we know things must be serious if that's happening. I did notice on the way in, though, that Jackie Lambie is not happy that it might be called on Mother's Day. She somehow feels that it's going to have a negative impact upon this special day for mothers. So myself, I don't quite see the connection, but if it happens today, it's symbolic for other reasons as well.
It's a curious thing. Chris Lawrence, it's a significant election. I think we've got two first-time campaigners out there, both leading their first national campaign. How would you characterise what we're about to go through? What are the big things for you?
Well, I think the big things are that every election is important, and under the Constitution we have a democratic society, and I think that for Malcolm Turnbull and for Bill Shorten, after the dog's breakfast we've all had over the last few years with Tony Abbott, and I think that I'm looking forward to some hopeful, better outcomes for all of us.
There's every indication, Georgina, isn't there, that it is a bit of a clash of ideas. This is not an empty campaign. There are, as we saw in this past week with the two contrasting budget statements, that there's there are serious divisions here around policy and ideas.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, you might have missed it, but Scott Morrison presented this budget as being about jobs and growth, and maybe I think he mentioned it 5 or 6 times in the one speech. But I mean, that is the key. He is trying to pitch a plan to transition our economy from the resources mining boom to the next stage, a modern services-driven economy, and in order to do that, the tax cuts that they're offering in this budget are going to be able to drive that growth and create those jobs. Bill Shorten, on the other hand, is he's going back to sort of a 1950s style class warfare, which I think Australians are actually, we've moved on. This is not the society we live in anymore. We should be celebrating people's success, ambition, drive to improve their lot in life, rather than bring down, that tall poppy syndrome. I've never been a fan of it, and I don't think most Australians are.
Is that it? You mean aspirational tall poppies?
Well, I'm an Aboriginal person, and I don't see any changes that have happened for Aboriginal people in this country. We're still the poorest, the sickest, most unemployed, lowest education, and the most incarcerated people in our own country. So I don't agree with what Georgina is saying, because not everybody's enjoying success in this country. And, mining, the mining industry, they mine on Aboriginal land, and yet Aboriginal, and all they want to put back into is give Aboriginal people, build a school or build a community service. Give the Aboriginal people the money. That's what I say.
Con, as much as we often, and this is flavour of the month in terms of our discussions around politics, we talk down the system that we have, we despair often of our politicians, and yet here we are in this moment where we are invested with this opportunity and responsibility. This actually is a real thing in election. We do have influence, we do have a say.
We do, and perhaps later we'll come back to compulsory voting, because that's always been one of my bugbears in this particular country. But I'm not so sure that there is a great contrast between the two major camps here. I suspect that the Labor Party has to present an alternate view. They're in opposition. They need to be able to present something that's different. Otherwise, people will tend to just keep going with what they currently see in front of them. So I think the contrarian view that you're seeing from Shorten is a result of an election campaign that's been really in process now for a couple of months. So I think that view is well established, and there's still quite a long way to go. And I don't think there's a huge difference between the two parties. And in many ways, they're kind of being forced to act a little bit differently just to provide an alternative.
Politics being a game of the centre, as we know. Look, here's an insider's view. Here's Peter Credlin speaking on Sky News yesterday. How does she characterise what's about to happen? Where's it going to be won and lost?
If you look at the polls where they are now, I think you look at the fact that this is the first time campaign for both leaders. I think the fact that it's a 54-odd day campaign, much longer than usual. I tell you, 33 days is hard. I couldn't imagine a 54-day slog. Hard work. This campaign, more than any other campaign in recent history, will matter more because so much of it will turn on how the performances are during the campaign, how the machines for both sides will run the ground war and marginal seats, and how the lead characters, ministers, shadow ministers, will perform.
Incredible risk in this, isn't there, Georgina? We have these two performers who, as Peter Credlin points out, this is the first time that Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull have run a national campaign. It's not just any national campaign, it is one of extraordinary length, which opens the possibility for all manner of triumph and disaster.
Absolutely, and Peter's right. The ground war, the local campaigns in the marginal seats will be where it's won and lost. And I mean, at this stage, the polls are very close. The latest poll, I think, was by Reachtel, had us at 50-50.
And a Galaxy one in the tabloids this morning too, 50-50.
Yeah,
so that's
So it's, I mean,
be closer.
Yeah. But I mean, elections in Australia tend to be very close, and polls tend to be about at that stage. So I'm not surprised by those results. It will be down to those marginal seats here in Victoria, in Queensland, and in New South Wales, I would say. And the local campaigns will be so important, as well as the national messaging. And I think too, the choice between the two leaders. I mean, Bill Shorten yesterday, I think it was saying, it's not about the personalities. Well, he would say that because he's concerned about his own personality and his own reputation as a pretty duplicitous and unreliable guy.
Whereas Malcolm Turnbull, but Chris might be concerned at his reputation as being from the larger end of town. So,
well, I watched a little bit of the David Spears interview with Malcolm last night, and I just thought that Malcolm was really defending his position. He wasn't really coming out and being honest about his challenge to Tony Abbott for the position and why he really challenged him. And so, for me, I just think that I just want Malcolm to be upfront and honest. I've met Malcolm. I know Malcolm, and I know that him and Lucy are very very generous too with their own philanthropy. But at the end of the day, he's the Prime Minister, and he's in this position, and he's got the opportunity to really shine and make a difference for everybody.
Outsiders here on Sunday Extra, Chris Lawrence there from University of Melbourne, Georgina Downer from the Admin Committee of the Victorian Liberal Party, and Professor Con Stavros from RMIT, School of Economics, Finance and Marketing. Con, it's an election, as Peter Credlin sort of suggested in the grab we just heard a moment ago, is about the sort of the science, the detail, the really targeted marketing of very specific parts of the country with very specific ideas. It's a very exact process.
It is. It's a very data-driven process these days as well, and it's something that's come out perhaps of the American elections and Obama in particular having great success with it. So we know an incredible amount about the people that vote these days. We know what kind of topics that they're interested in, the topics that are not interested in, and how to blend them together. So it'll be one of these first campaigns where we really see the targeting of those key marginal electorates. If you live in a marginal electorate over the next couple of months, you're going to be absolutely swamped.
The great unknown in all of that is, yes, there is all that targeting, and yes, there is that sort of scientific surveying of attitude, but ultimately we just don't know how people are truly going to respond.
We don't. We know that they gravitate a little bit back towards the government, so it might be 50-50 now, but I'd still have the government a little bit out in front. The danger for the government now, of course, is it's a long campaign. To me, that's a strategically weak position to go into, because you open up the opportunities to be caught up and to be caught up in a very difficult narrative. So it certainly gives the opposition a lot of time to try a lot of different things, see what's going to stick and what doesn't stick. And ultimately, of course, and I hinted at it before, everyone in Australia has to go and make a vote and has to make a choice. So that throws a little bit of a spanner in the works as well, because there will be a group of undecided people who will turn up at the polling booth and make a decision at that point.
A long campaign, Georgina, and for the Prime Minister leading a party which to this point has had its divisions and has had people within that party unhappy with his leadership and vocal on that point. Can he pull them together for that long stretch?
Well, I don't think that's a totally accurate characterisation. The Liberal Party is a broad church, and the Parliamentary Party is no different from the grassroots party membership. It's a coming together of conservative and classical liberal traditions. There will always be a little bit of jostling for where the, I guess, preeminence of those traditions sits in the Liberal Party, but ultimately the parliamentary team is extremely strongly behind Malcolm Turnbull, and Tony Abbott has made that very clear over the last couple of weeks, that he just wants to get behind the leader, the Prime Minister, and make sure we win this election.
And winning, Chris, is an interesting thing here. I mean, we're looking at 50-50 polling. We could be headed to another 2010 situation where the outcome is not necessarily all that clear after election day, whenever that may be.
Well, I think it's also the tactic that they use in their campaigns, and I was reading a bit of that online last night, that social media is really, the way that I think that they'll be using. They'll be sending out much more messages, texting, and online, a lot of stuff on Facebook. They're using Facebook much more vehemently now, and I think that that's how they'll reach out to young Australians, particularly who are engaged on social media. So I think that they'll be very tactful in how they sell their campaigns to everybody.
Jonathan, what I find really interesting with this, in particularly in Australian politics, is everyone wants the underdog position. So as a marketer,
Phil Shorten very much claiming it.
We're going to see this scramble, and you don't see this in many other countries in the world. Of course, in America, of course, to be in front, to be a leader, to be the presumptive nominee, that's what everyone wants to do. In Australian politics, this idea of coming from behind, appealing to the underdog, appealing to this notion is firmly entrenched, not just in politics, but in sport and life in general. So it's 2 months, and Peter Credlin had talked about it being a hard slog. It's going to be a hard slog for the general public here over the next 2 months, because I think a lot of us will sit back and say, well, who's running the country? What's happening at this critical kind of time? Everyone's busy trying to save their seat or get their party into power. So it's going to be tough for us on the sidelines trying to observe and make sense of all of this.
Well, one thing is certain, that if the polling publicised today is any indicator, we're undecided on that point, and we don't know who's our top dog and who's our underdog. We'll find out shortly enough. There may be an election call today. We don't know yet. They're waiting outside Government House, as we just heard from Andrew Green, but no sign of the Prime Minister. Thanks to our outsiders, I'm sure you'll all be staying tuned to events over these next long few days. Associate Professor Constavros, Georgina Downer, Dr. Chris Lawrence.
Okay, here endeth that movie.